We definitely went electric there towards the end of that one, harkening back to your Raymond Carver couple type of manic energy. So, it's acoustic overall, but like that, it demonstrates you have your moments where you're not afraid to go into open some other doors and go in.
And the fun and funny thing about that is that wasn't me playing electric guitar on the end of it, because we were trying to do pretty much everything live. That was Bob Donham. And that's a style at the end of that song that I would normally play in. Like, I think I am known somewhat on my own records, but definitely on sessions that I've played as the kind of like weirder, noisier guitar guy. And I've done sessions with Bob where there's two electric guitars and he's the kind of more tasteful riffs and stuff. But on this, he got to do both. And I think he was having a lot of fun pretending to be me almost in a way.
Quietly mocking you.
Yeah, maybe, right?
if Chris was going to play, he'd play this.
Yeah, right.
Well, hey, it fooled me because it sounded like the same guitars from Raymond Carver. People go back and listen to Chris's earlier appearance and you'll hear what I'm talking about. This, you'll also hear, if you go back to that early one, how different Ghost Menagerie is from this one. Not better or worse, just different. I like the fact that you do that every album. That's cool. A lot of people, well, the obvious examples of bands like Boston or Scorpions or AC/DC, they get into a thing and that's all people want to hear. Well, to make another analogy, Sylvester Stallone, people wanted to see him as Rocky. They wanted to see him as Rambo. They didn't want to see him be a country singer or this or that or these other roles, and it made him come back to it. So, and, right. The recently departed David Bowie, talk about somebody who changed all the time. So, it's good that you have that ability. Everybody doesn't have it.
I think it's, like I said before, sort of shooting for something and missing, hopefully in an interesting way. Like with Ghost Menagerie, I don't know if this will make sense at all, but what I told the band that I said, I want to make a Neil Diamond record. So whatever that meant to me at the time, Ghost Menagerie came out of that initial idea. Other records I've made, I've said I want to make a really weird Elliott Smith record, or, sort of have these reference points that inform the beginnings of the process, at least, and then it tends to go somewhere else. But
well, listen to that one again with Song Sung Blue and Sweet Caroline in the back of my head.
Right.
Well, let's talk about the album opener. It's a song called Eden. What made you want to kick off the track listing with that one? Because I'm always curious why somebody picks one as an opener.
I think it had to do two things. It was upbeat. I wanted to start with an upbeat album, or with an upbeat song, even though I think Evangeline and Fisher King are my favorite songs, or the ones I'm most proud of when I hear them again. They're kind of downers. I didn't want to start the album that way. So anyways, that was the first thing. And then also it's the most stripped down at the very beginning. It's just an acoustic guitar, and then I'll get an electric guitar and a pedal steel come in, but they're pretty sparse too, and then it's just my voice. So it seemed like a good statement for like, I'm okay opening this album with a super simple song. Like, it's 3 chords, there's not much going on, and that felt like kind of wildly different for me because a lot of my stuff is hyperactive in a way. And so to simplify everything, the chords, the arrangement, and the emotional delivery, I thought, well, this will be new for me. And
it's something to sonically build on too.
Yeah, right.
If you open your album with good vibrations, then what do you follow it up with?
Where do you go, right?
And now track 2. Can we just make this a single? Which is kind of what they did. They kind of
right, exactly.
Well, along the same lines, why did you want to close the album with a track called Silently?
That one, like, I don't know what the experience of someone listening to the record is, but what I imagined was that it would feel a little bit heavy. And I wanted to end the album with something that was lyrically consistent with that feeling, but also musically a little bit silly, so that there would be some humor. The depressing lyrics fit in with a little humorous pill or something. So that was one part of it. And then I thought I kind of harkened back to that Great American Songbook style, a little bit jazzy, which was similar to 1973. So I knew I needed to separate those songs. So I figured, well, I'll just put it at the end as a little bit of a reward for anyone who's gone through all of these slow, sad songs.
Yeah, it reminds me of a Triangle song too, because that was another one we talked about that had the happy music and the grim lyrics.
Yeah, right.
Well, it's definitely.
Which, you know what? I was just gonna say, now that I'm a father, I listen to Triangle song and I think, man, that is bleak. Like, I don't want my daughter listening to that and adopting that worldview, I really got to like.
Well, returning to films, when Steven Spielberg made Close Encounters of the Third Kind, he wasn't a parent. So at the end of the movie where Richard Dreyfuss decides to leave his wife and kids and go on the spaceship and forever never see him again, he said, I would never do that now,
Right,
so,
yeah.
But when he made the movie at the time, he's like, wife, kids, I don't know. I don't get that. I'd rather go have the adventure. But now it's like, well, I guess it's maybe I'm with them wasn't on the table.
Right. Well, I guess it's good to have things like that, though, where you can react against them in your own work, too, because, I think my next album's already done, but the one after that, the stuff I'm writing songs for now, I'm kind of consciously trying to have a little bit more of a somewhat positive, hopeful outlook within the lyrics, which is really difficult to do. It's easy to write a sad song. It's tough to write a more hopeful song, but it's a challenge I'm trying to do because I feel bad about the bleakness of some of the.
So you say the next album is done, so I can have you come back on in April? We can book the next interview and plug that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Well, Silently, it's definitely a mellow and whimsical note to go out on. He's got farm animal sounds in it. It's like,
there's a choir of chickens, right?
Exactly. So it definitely leaves people a little lighthearted. And switching gears to the opposite of whimsical, let's talk about Stained Glass Windows with its prominent line, "Living without you is like a heart attack."
Yeah, that was a song I really kind of wrestled with after it was recorded. Like, I felt very exposed vocally, and kind of like I wondered if the sentiment was, it's a pretty straightforward emotional statement. I guess it's good to have doubts about your own work occasionally, but that was when I'm like, is that just too straightforward? Like, or should I just let it be? And then I said in the end, like, this whole album is partially about just letting the emotions live in the places they need to live and not cluttering it up with a bunch of arrangement or whatever. So I just said, well, fuck it, let's just leave it on the album.
The Great Make-Believer Unmasked. So you should have gone, The Great Make-Believer Revealed.
Right, revealed.
Well, I like the way you developed the melody on that one. Take it some interesting places. Just as a musician, I like where it goes. So yeah, I actually like it. Lines like that jump out at you, when you mention heart attacks and things, but it doesn't. As you said, your music is sophisticated enough that, for example, Queen, Sheer Heart Attack, that music sounded like someone was having one when they played it or was going to get it from listening to it. I mean, it was like fast paced, it's like heart rate up, so
right.
It's nice to, like you said.
So I guess my song is maybe a slower heart attack, but I think when I'm singing that, it's at least the most like sort of strident vocal and melodic part of the song.
People, everything is sensationalized. I remember, I think it was the very first Superman movie with Christopher Reeve. I'm talking about a lot of movies today for some reason, but Glenn Ford, is that who played his dad in that? He's like walking and he just says, "Oh no." And he takes his pulse and realizes his heart isn't beating and he just drops dead. You know what I mean? He's just like, it's like he realizes what's happening and he just calmly says, "Oh no," and dies. You know what I mean? Like, that's more memorable to me than the whole Fred Sanford, "I'm coming to see you, Elizabeth." All that drama and everything. But I have to say, my uncle had a heart attack, and my father had a heart blockage, and my grandfather died from a heart attack. So I'm hoping I don't ever experience one. But, as I say, the one I remember was the chill one, not the
yeah, right.
Crazy dramatics. Well, there have been a lot of songs written about all of our various holidays. You probably don't know this, but Christmas has inspired a song or two, by which I mean 2 million. Not a lot of songs written about Veterans Day, though. So how did that come to pass?
How did that come to pass? I think I was remembering back to, in high school, I played in the marching band. And it kind of wasn't like far enough on in the season where the snow would stick on the ground. But sometimes there was snow and it would melt in the street. And there was something very sad about that to me. And then mixed with, remembrance and all the stuff around veterans expressing their service and grief and all loss and all that stuff, seemed like just a really sad setting. So within the context of it being a relationship song, and also I think in the chorus there's allusions to, the loss of faith and belief that, love lasts and all these things. So, I can thank my marching band experience for that.
Well, it's been a while since I've seen the changing of the seasons and the melting of the snow. I did live in New York and in Germany and in Virginia. but that was in my childhood. In 1978, I moved to Northern California. Didn't get any snow in Sacramento, and after 13 years there, I've been in Arizona for like 24 years. So you got to kind of drive up to what we call the high country. You got to go to where the snow is, but you don't forget that. And honestly, with my two kids, I kind of regret a little bit that they aren't experiencing the 4 distinct seasons. Arizona's hot and hotter and not as hot, and those are the seasons. There's no snowman and all that kind of stuff. But I do know the vibe you're talking about, the peaceful, tranquil, freshly fallen snow, and then when it's all dirty and packed, and it's kind of sad, and needs to go away.
Sick of it, right?
Right. Well,
yeah, I think those they're like emotional markers, and time. It's nice to have that like very literal marker of time passing, and it reflects something internal that goes on. And I when I lived in Portland, Oregon, there were seasons, but they were definitely less pronounced than in New England, and I missed the kind of crisp distinctions between the seasons when I was in Oregon.
Well, was in Oregon about rain and less rain and more rain?
Yeah, hot and no rain versus like kind of mild and rainy, and then a little cold and rainy. I
remember seeing some Trailblazers players talking about, nobody washes their car up here. In a few days, it's going to get rained on anyway. Well, Veterans Day, it's one of my favorite tracks on the album, mainly because I like the airiness, the quality it has. Feels like it has a lot of space in it, probably due to the relaxed guitar licks, having a little conversation with each other. What we spoke about, the musicians finding their spots. So let's check this out. Here's Chris's salute to Veterans Day. See what I did there?
Let there be things that I can't undo, said things I can't unsay. But believe I love you just as much as I did on that day. When you wore that blue dress you knew I liked so much.
So I count 3 lyrical motifs happening in there. You've got the expected military imagery, also the mention of a variety of specific colors, and finally, various articles of clothing. In other words, you mentioned a dress and a hat, and you rattled off several colors and everything. So, most people might have done one of those, and I picked up on 3. So, in fact, let me see.
No, I've just never noticed that before. I think I was just trying to think, well, how can I make this sort of richly descriptive? But obviously the dress keeps returning as a motif, but I didn't pick up on the other articles of clothing being related.
Well, that's what I'm here for, man. And speaking of
analysis,
speaking of descriptions, let's talk about your involvement in the world of poetry. Did that evolve from the songwriting, or was it the other way around?
I wrote really awful poetry in college, and kind of fell in love with reading poetry then. I was an English major. And then when I got out of college, I sort of was full tilt into the music thing. And I was on tour in, I think, 2008 maybe. And we were busking next to City Lights Books in San Francisco. And we took a break, and I went in there and stopped in the poetry aisle. And I got a book by Kay Ryan, which I kind of fell in love with. And then, it was almost instantaneous. I got back to Portland and just started listening to poetry podcasts, started consuming as much poetry as I could. And then I started writing it again, with kind of more informed by things I was reading. I realized how kind of bad my stuff was and how far I had to go. So I just dove into writing and trying to get better. And I took a couple MFA workshop classes when I was in Oregon. And when I moved to Maine and was far away from my musical home, and wasn't playing gigs, and then had a child, so wasn't going to go out to rock clubs, and it kind of became the preferred artistic medium, because all you need is
something you can do alone,
pad or a computer, right? And
now, are you involved in the written word only, or do you also like the spoken performance aspect of reading the poetry out loud?
I like doing readings, but I wouldn't say I'm I'm not a dramatic reader in terms of the spoken word tradition. So it's kind of not what I do. I respect people who have that dramatic delivery. I'm kind of more of a page poet, I guess.
You would write it and you would expect someone to read it and voice it in their own head. Because usually when I think of poetry, those are the 2 things I think of: written poetry that you read and somebody reciting a poem. Was my point.
Yeah, I mean, I probably think of it a little bit more in the written way, except that when I'm writing, there's a musicality to it, and the sonic quality of the lines I'm definitely considering. So I just don't care whether I'm the person performing it. So I guess that's the part of it's fine for it to live musically in someone else's head.
See, in my own case, I know that I had a girlfriend years ago who explained to me, when I told her I wanted to be like a Jeff Beck type and just play music and forget lyrics, she goes, no, lyrics, they add so much, you really need to do it. And she convinced me that it was necessary. So for me, it's never really been something I particularly enjoy, but it's something I see the value in and the thing I've worked at. And, but I would imagine that if I was going to do poetry, it would be sort of freeing, because I wouldn't have to match it up to a melody or a rhythm or anything. I could just let it flow freely. But, my question to someone who's a musician and a songwriter and also does poetry, instead of either or, would be what are you getting from that you're not getting from songwriting?
I think it's what you just said. It's freeing to not have to match it to a melody. So you can I think of them as very separate things. Obviously, language is the building blocks of both, but one can be arrhythmic, and you can use big words, you can use really dumb words. Poetry is kind of freer in that way to me. I mean, because it's freer, I feel like you also have to really like rise to the occasion of doing it well, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Whereas music, when you put lyrics to music, you can kind of get away with things that are, objectively just stupid.
We all get away with stuff. For example, rhyming fire with fire. Come on, baby, light my fire. Try to set the night on fire.
Right, exactly.
Somebody pointed out in War Pigs, generals gathered in their masses, just like witches at black masses. You rhyme the same word with the same word. You get away with it because the music's so cool.
Yeah, or even dumber is just, like la la la, sha na na, things like that are super fun and very important and have they have emotional weight, but as just language, it's kind of like whatever.
Well, we spoke about that on my other show that I do with Olivia when we spoke about some of the doo wah diddy diddy, some of the wop bop a loo wop kind of stuff. There was a Leo Sidran, a friend of mine. Everybody I know does a podcast. Let me just say that does a Third Story podcast. He opened one of his episodes. His guest had done. They sat at the piano when they played and they recorded themselves, but it was a medley of songs that everybody knows, but that have no lyrics. It's like one after the other. It might even chronological, like, My Cherie Moore, la, 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 and into the next one, and the next one, the next one. You start to realize they've never said a word, but you've recognized every song they've done. It's pretty cool.
And not to like denigrate that stuff, there's definitely poetry in that, like a wop bop a loo, like that is poetic, and especially in the context of the music. And I think a lot of it's about context. So
yeah.
And the same is true for lyrics and poetry. It's like,
it's very rhythmic. Both of them are rhythmic. Our last episode, we spoke about Anita O'Day, who is a jazz singer who would just go like Ella Fitzgerald off into some scat or just turn her voice into an instrument. Just not worry about words anymore and just make it all about, conveying a melody the way you would on a horn.
Sure. Yeah, I love that stuff.
And when I say your involvement in poetry, I want to point out that you've entered competitions and won. Do I have that right?
Yeah. So I've had pretty good luck. Good luck.
Well, luck. You don't win a poetry competition by luck. You either win it by being good or by bribing the judges, but I don't think there's any luck involved.
Yeah, no. So I've won a couple of those things, and I've been published in really respected magazines. Like Poetry Magazine is, it might be the kind of premier poetry publication in America. I had a poem in there last year. So, a lot of good stuff has happened like that. The poetry world is very weird though, in terms of like the readership is pretty small compared to something like pop music or fiction or something like that. So it does rely on its readers to kind of financially float the whole enterprise. So competitions, like there's a lot of first book prizes. That's generally how a new writer gets published for a whole collection of their work, is by paying these fees. And it's weird coming from indie rock. It seems so kind of schmarmy to have an entry fee into something, but I get it, because the audience, they need to make money to put these things out. So
yeah, I get that. But, I wouldn't have brought up the topic of poetry if I didn't know you were out there kicking butt. And if you're just like sitting at home writing poetry, and there are people that, let's face it, they'll take anything you send them and publish it in a book. There's no concern about the quality of it, because let's face it, it's subjective too. I mean, I'm not saying this is the case with you, but I've known other people who are all excited because they were a published poet. Then I saw the book and there was like 783 other published poets in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like
there's a lot of vanity stuff out there. I mean, the internet has been, I think, ultimately really great for poetry. I think readership is up over the last 10 years, and there's so many outlets for it. And then, that also creates kind of the opposite problem, is there's so many outlets for it that anyone can publish a poem in whatever.
It's almost a catch-22, but it's not quite a catch-22, because you can break through, and people do. But yeah, it's harder. But some people that had no chance, they might have a slim chance now, but they have a chance that had no chance before.
Right.
So, and that's why CD Baby DIY is so important, because I can't keep up with all the stuff that's going on, and even if you don't particularly pick, like lately you've talked about photo sessions, and you've talked about different ways to master things, and you've talked about pretty much every topic. And even if you go back in your guys' history and look at earlier episodes, things have changed so much since then. So just to keep things current and relevant, I mean, the thing will come along like, what was Neil Young's thing, Pono?
Oh yeah, right.
For people who don't know what that is, he didn't like the degradation of the sound quality of MP3s, but he understood that people wanted things digital and they didn't necessarily want vinyl, and they wanted to pass it along digitally. So he goes, well, I'll make something that it can hold so much information that you will get no sound degradation, and a few other artists jumped on it, and then it just kind of didn't catch on, from what I know. And a lot of things don't, but I'm always glad when people are throwing things out there, because who would have known that MySpace or Facebook was going to become what it was? Somebody had to toss it out there, and then it had to grow. So
yeah, and who knows what's going to catch.
Well, the thing I thought was immediately funny about Pono was it was one letter off from porno. So I didn't know if that was going to be an advantage or a disadvantage. I mean, on some level, I guess you could trick people and think, oh, what's this porno thing? Oh, it's Pono? Oh, damn, I already bought it. And you never know. Sometimes things will get thrown out there and they'll be forgotten about, but they'll come around later. And, somebody even said recently that cassettes are coming back. That kind of surprises me. That kind of surprises me. The vinyl coming back, there's a hipster thing, and that wasn't my generation, but it looks kind of cool. I want to do it. I remember when I had an album collection, it was heavy, and they would sit in the sun and get warped, or they'd get scratched. And I'm not nostalgic about that aspect of it. The thing I am nostalgic about is album artwork. When an album was like, a foot, 12 by 12, and they had beautiful artwork on it, and then you'd open it up and there was information. A lot of times you buy a download. If somebody just downloads one track from a new album, they won't know who played on it or the details. So the liner note guys sort of gets lost. But so, nostalgia for vinyl, I kind of get. Like, I go into Whole Foods and I'll see a listening station, a bunch of vinyl, 8-track tapes or cassette tapes. I mean, tape, that stuff would break. It would get garbled. It kind of had a shelf life. It kind of like, you knew you were going to listen to it so many times, it was going to start to wear away.
Get demagnetized, right?
We used to like cassettes for two reasons. They were more portable. And, it's a lot easier to throw a cassette in your car and get a cassette player in your car than play a vinyl album, obviously. And also as a musician, if you wanted to learn the guitar solo in Stairway to Heaven, it's a lot easier to pause and hit play and then to do a needle drop on vinyl. So,
right. I remember that. I think that the cassette thing definitely has that hipster, appeal. It's like even like more hipster to release something on cassette.
I still remember someone walking up and handing me my first Walkman. It was a Walkman. It's like, hey, man, put your head, it's going to blow. And it was loud. I'll give them that. And it didn't sound amazing, but, it was kind of cool. You could, and of course, that's evolved into the iPod, same thing. Instead of having to switch out tapes, you carry music around with you or wear it on your arm and jog or whatnot. But this is what I'm talking about. These things come up sort of randomly here and there, depending on who my guest is on this show. But on your show, you'll do a news segment where no matter what you guys are talking about that episode, you'll talk about, today at Apple Music, something like that. So yeah. And Mark Herrick, one of our main supporters of both my shows, came to this show because he heard me mentioned on your show. So.
Oh, awesome.
So that's one thing that's kind of cool. The podcasting is a community, which is awesome. Well, we do have one more song to play, but and we'll get to that in a minute. But before I let you go, I want to hit you with a trivia question of a geographical nature. In addition to Oregon and Maine, in how many other U.S. states will you also find a city called Portland?
Oh, man. I just need to get the number. Is this?
Yeah.
Let's say
you've lived in 2.
Let's say that there's 2 more.
Okay. The correct answer is 12.
Whoa.
There are 14 Portlands.
I've got my work cut out for me then. I need to start moving every 3 years.
Well, here are the others: Arkansas, Connecticut, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Missouri, New York, North Dakota, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. Because let's face it, when we think of landlocked states like North Dakota, we're naturally going to associate them with ports, right?
With the ports, of course.
Well, I wouldn't expect you to actually live in all 14 Portlands, of course, but how awesome would it be to do a 14-gig national tour where every show is in a town called Portland? I'd buy that t-shirt.
That would be awesome. Wow.
The little tour itinerary, everything is important.
It's like the most financially irresponsible but awesome tour idea. I have to do that.
Well, I think it's out there now. I think all of our listeners in, Portland, Tennessee and Portland, Arkansas are going to be expecting you to roll through. Well, it's just a bizarre coincidence that you went from Portland, Oregon to Portland, Maine, but both Portlands make sense because they're coastal. You think of ports.
Sure. And the Western one is named after the Eastern one.
Yeah. How about that? And obviously, New York, the original York is in England, New Jersey. But when I had Robin Trower on, he lived in Hampshire. And I thought, oh, New Hampshire. And I hadn't thought about that. He was in Hampshire talking to me. All right, cool. Well, I obviously want to encourage everyone to pick up Chris's new album. As I said, we have one more song yet to play from it. But in addition to the 5 tracks we did play today, there are also 5 others that we talked about, which are just as good, but we didn't play. So you're going to want to check those out as well. I think we can all agree that the Skype experiment has been a success. So thanks to Tom Bowers for helping out tonight. With his engineering expertise. Thanks also to Kevin Bruner and to Lauren Bro. Thanks one last final time to Mike Post for all the contributions he made over the years. And as we said earlier, Chris, hopefully you'll be able to turn around the next album a little faster than last time. It sounds like you've already made a lot of progress on that.
Yep, I'll be back next month then. And
yeah, it's just an album a month. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to do an album a month, and each one's going to be in a destination studio in a various Portland, because there's 12 Portlands you haven't lived in, and there's 12 months in the year. I think it's falling into line.
That's a grand assumption that there are people that live in all of these Portlands, I guess. But hopefully, maybe I'll be playing in the post office at some of them or something. Yeah, the challenge has been set.
I'm sure that there's other Phoenixes around. I mean, everybody thinks of Phoenix, Arizona, and I think there's a Chevy Chase in every state. Clearly, there's a Springfield. They've covered that on the Simpsons.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I also want to thank you for sending in that clip from my anniversary show.
Oh yeah,
it's been a little while ago, but I just wanted to remember to thank you for doing that. That was cool. And just about everybody asked did one, and I had like over 60 of them, and it really made the show pretty special. To hear from past guests.
It was fun to listen to too, and just kind of like wonder who was going to be doing the next little message.
As you know, as a podcaster, like we're doing right now, Tom is engineering. I'm speaking. You're speaking. It's the 3 of us. We finish it. We move on to the next one. There's a dude in Norway who's going to listen to this. There's a dude in Sydney, Australia who's going to listen. And then when they call in and say so, it becomes a sort of a visceral sort of wake-up call, like, oh, yeah, people listen. I know a lot of people talk about, they do a TV show or a movie, and they work real hard on it, and then it debuts and premieres, and people start to recognize them, and they think, it seems weird to say, but they forget that people are going to see it, and people are seeing it because you're so focused on doing it.
And with podcasting, it's weird because they might, stumble upon this episode 5 years from now. And like on the DIY podcast, we have people who just come across it and they go back and binge listen to, 150 episodes over the course of, a few weeks or months. And I am like terrified of what I might have said in 2008 about the music industry. I'm like, hindsight, I probably sound like a total idiot. So
no, I heard just about all the ones you guys did. I knew it was never that much off track. But, for the anniversary one, for my own sort of homework, I was going to go back and listen to all of my old shows. And I started to realize, man, I've done like 80 of these at that point. It's a lot of work to do, And
right.
The weird thing was I'd forgot a lot of the questions and the answers and even some of the song selections, so I was kind of surprised. It's almost like I wasn't, even though I was on the show, it was almost like I wasn't, it's kind of like a little bit odd experience, but kind of cool in a way.
Well, it's nice to let time pass so you can forget all of your own, tricks and stuff. It's like, I can't really, my own music, I'm not going to pop on The Great Make Believer anytime soon. But after, 5 years go by, I can hear it again and be like, oh, that was a cool song, or like, oh, that was an interesting chord change. Whereas right now it seems so.
Yeah, you get perspective. You get perspective over time, and sometimes like Carl Jha said when he was on here, you think as time goes by, your guitar tone is improving, you got a better amp and this and that and the other. And he goes, then you come across some cassette that you did like 20 years ago, and you think, I still kind of sound the same. Or you think, right. or you think,
that sounded really cool. And
yeah, it sounded good. Like I wish I could do that now. And you think you've made all this progress, but Yeah, well, it's true. These things are being documented. I don't think it takes 5 years for me to forget what I've done, because the other show I do with Olivia Dabo, we record batches of those, and then we spread them out over 2 months if we're lucky enough to get 8 of them in the can. Then I'll get the finished thing, and I will have forgotten. I mean, even though we had done it not that long ago. But part of the reason for that is because those shows are completely spontaneous. We just show up. I toss something out there. Yeah, I toss something out. She starts talking about it. The next episode, she throws something out, and I talk about it. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm glad we do that one. But this one, faithful listeners, we'll continue to do this. I like to grab an artist like you, an album like you did, and delve into it. I'll never lose interest in doing that.
Well, I appreciate it. Do you get nervous before the your other show, kind of not knowing where it's going to go, or are you totally practiced and fun?
I wasn't sure. Those are actually my favorite episodes. I call them black holes, because we hit record and I have no idea what song she's picked, what the topic's going to be. There's a little bit of me that thinks, what if she brings up something and I have nothing to say about it? But I actually prefer those ones because she has a lot of enthusiasm for it, and she talks more in those ones than I do. And I'm kind of responding to her. So that's a good question. But yeah, no, I actually like them as much or better. I mean, the ones I threw out there, I know what I think about it, and then I don't know what she's going to say. So that's interesting. And then we have our feature, Tom at 20. Tom, a smart guy, and he has something to add. So it's kind of cool because I throw mine out, she throws her out. And some people listening are probably thinking certain things that we're not. And I'll bet you, 8 or 9 out of 10 times when Tom comes in, he tosses in what they're thinking. So, and then if we missed
the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire Lifeline.
That's right. He's our lifeline.
Yeah.
But then, and then we do have our social media. So if anybody has, like I mentioned, some weird experience, kind of quasi dream I had. And as I expected, people started throwing theirs out. Oh man, I had this dream and that dream. So yeah, podcasting is cool, man. It's narrowcasting. It's a community. The podcasters themselves, the listeners, the guests, and it's only growing. It's only getting better. As I've said on other shows, my iPod died one time, and after years of not doing it, I turned the actual radio on in my car, and it's like I flipped through the stations. It was advertisement. I always feel like the radio is like yelling at me. It's yelling about a sale, and then when you actually get to actual content, it's so like simple-minded and watered down, and it's the pork and beans of thought. It's like I'm thinking
it's all sound bites,
and I'm wondering. I'm wondering, like, did it always suck? Was it always this way, and we just didn't know any better, or has it become this? I think it was always kind of. Actually, I won't say that. I will say there was a time when you listened to FM rock radio, and you had DJ personalities, and they would play a variety of music. There was time we became corporate and programmed and lame, or let's face it, they need money. Like you mentioned, the poetry people before, the one reason you constantly land on advertising is that's pretty much the only way they can fund the thing. So there you go.
Yeah. And then I know this is a whole other topic we could get into, but I think it's criminal that corporate radio, terrestrial radio, still doesn't pay artists royalties. They pay the songwriters, publishers, publishing royalty, but for all that advertising revenue, they're bringing in I don't know. It's more than 100-year-old law that's dictating that practice, and they do everything they can to fight having to pay. But
yeah, that's uncool.
But anyways, that's another tangent.
Yeah, and also the thing about streaming. I mean, I myself have music on Spotify and iTunes, and I get like a 9/100ths of a penny or something when somebody streams, and I see that little windfall come across my account at CD Baby that, hey, somebody, a lot of the times, like I said, it's a fraction of a penny. Every once in a while, somebody will spend $12 on an album, and I'll go, oh, big money. But, that's the thing. You almost wonder if somebody listens to the stream and then buys the album, that's cool. But if they listen to the stream and they don't buy the album, not because they don't like it, but because they realize they can just stream it whenever they want to, then yeah, the person who created the recording gets a pitiful return. And from what's been reported, the executives at some of these streaming companies are paying themselves 7 figures, and they're paying Aretha Franklin $22 or something. It's like, it is absurd.
Oh yeah, I mean, especially the streaming royalties for major label artists is also kind of a crime, because those labels have gotten advances from Spotify and similar companies, and they don't pay their artists hardly anything, which is why major label artists are always complaining about Spotify As you know, at least you and I were getting 100% of what's paid to us because we own our recordings. And
Right. Robert Lamb from Chicago said you haven't really made it in the music business until you've sued your record company. You know, because if anything,
rite of passage.
if anything comes in, they're going to keep it, and you're going to have to fight for it. But of course, you know, the model back then was they would pay your studio time, they'd pay for the limos you're in, they'd pay for so much stuff up front that they wanted to recoup. But they also knew that, you know, if you have some knucklehead artist, I'm not talking about Chicago, but you know, a band like Black Sabbath, for example, you know, they would like give those guys a nice car and a nice house, and they think they were rich, and then the real money, you know, would go elsewhere. So, yeah, unfortunate stuff goes on and on. You have to have a love for it to put up with all of that crap.
Yeah, that reminds me of that. Have you seen that Badfinger documentary? That it's on YouTube. It's broken up into about 5 different parts, but man, it is depressing.
Yeah, I know quite a bit about their story. It's so sad, and suicides, and just, you know, a sad tale of, you know, how things
Where all the money went.
Yeah, the people who deserve things don't get it, the people who don't do. And it's just kind of like if you're the biggest shark or have the worst morals or standards, you can come out ahead. But you know what? People out there do appreciate the best. I mean, when Glenn Frey died, you know, and when Bowie died and all these different people, you know, they were mourned and appreciated. Some faceless record executive who ripped off Ted Nugent or something, nobody gives a crap about that guy. So go enjoy your money. Who cares? We don't need you. All right. Well, that took a turn. You know, but as promised, we have one more track from Chris's album to listen to. You know, this is a spunky little number. I can't help imagining in my own mind that it's being sung by Elvis in an Elvis voice. So my advice is like to head out to Vegas or Memphis, where all those Elvis wannabes hang out, and maybe pitch it to one of them.
Now I'm suddenly realizing what song you're talking about.
You're realizing the 9 we've talked about and the one we haven't. You know, the song's called "Lonely People." Yeah, you know, it's cool the way you did it, but as you listen to it, or just sometime after we hang up here, get the guitar out and just try and do it in an Elvis voice and tell me it doesn't sound like possibly an Elvis tune.
I did have Sun Studio in mind when we started doing it, but, you know, the Hawaiian slide guitar came in and moved it to different territory.
Yeah, as you can see, as I hold this, one thing that's unusual about Skype, we can actually see each other. I've got as opposed to the phone calls we used to do, I got your album here. I'm going to have to give the MVP on this album to your pedal steel player. Paul Brainerd, is that his name?
Yeah, Paul Brainerd. Yeah, he's amazing.
Everybody on the album is great, and you know I'm going to set you aside because you're the artist and the singer on the song. But all the supporting cast, and I'm sure that you know your engineer is great too. But you know his playing throughout is an element that's like noticeably cool that really adds a nice little touch to all the tracks. So I'm not trying to denigrate anyone else, but I'm giving him the MVP for your supporting cast.
What's crazy about Paul is that he's a genius pedal steel player, but the first time I ever met him, I hired him to do some pedal steel on another record of mine. He came in, he listened to the song, he played it, and then he went into the other room and sat down at the piano and started playing the song. He'd never heard it before until he recorded the pedal steel. He played it, all the chords, all the melodies on the piano. He's amazing at that. He plays organ, guitar, dobro, mandolin, trumpet. The dude is a freak.
It's about having the right touch and the right feel with the pedal steel, and he's got it. It kind of reminds me back when Bernie Ledden did some steel work in the Eagles, you know. Like listen to a song like Best of My Love or something, you know, just listen to the texture he's adding. So, and
I don't even remember that there was pedal steel in that. I'll have to go back and listen.
I hope I'm remembering it right. So, I think, you know, we did, we kind of came in with CD Baby. Then we went to Chris Robley, and we kind of returned to CD Baby, turned it into a CD Baby episode there when we were talking about the streaming. But we will give the final word to Chris Robley and the Jordanaires. Elvis's backup, for anybody who doesn't know, with a song called Lonely People. So thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next Skype. So long, everybody.
Crippled birds can teach themselves to fly. Lonely people, don't you cry. Heartsick people, don't give up. Don't give up. give up. Don't give up. 'Cause the rain that's falling now could fill your empty cup. Heartsick people, don't give up. You finally learn to love the lady love is laid beside you. You finally promise to be true. You might find in time that life can still surprise you. She's no longer loving you. 'Cause you turned and walked away one too many times when you thought the love was always here to stay. Beside you, and you finally promise to be true. You might find in time that life can still surprise you. She's no longer loving you. 'Cause you turned and walked away one too many times when you thought the love was always here to stay. Hopeless people, dry your eyes. Hopeless people, dry your eyes. 'Cause every ending's a new beginning in disguise. Hopeless people, dry your eyes. 'Cause even crippled birds can teach themselves to fly. Lonely people,